The house went to him. The savings account, the RRSP, the life insurance, all of it. My daughter had been gone 11 days and her husband stood in that lawyer's office in downtown Halifax looking like a man who'd just won the lottery. He didn't even try to hide it. I sat across from him in that stiff-backed chair, still wearing the tie I'd worn to her funeral, and I watched him sign his name to papers that erased 31 years of my daughter's life. Everything she'd worked for, everything we'd helped her build, the down payment her mother and I gave them when they bought that house on Braemar Drive, the furniture we hauled up 3 flights of stairs, the weekends I spent painting their kitchen because they couldn't afford a contractor, all of it. His now. The lawyer, a quiet man with reading glasses on a chain, slid one envelope across the table toward me. He said my daughter had left instructions for it to be given to me personally, outside the estate. My son-in-law looked at it, just for a second. Then he looked away. Inside was a phone, her old one, the Samsung she'd stopped using 2 years ago when she upgraded. I remembered her asking me if I wanted it. She knew I was always dropping mine and cracking the screen. I'd laughed it off and said I was too old to learn a new device. She'd kept it in a drawer somewhere. And now here it was, in a padded envelope with my name written on it in her handwriting. That was all I inherited, an old phone. He got the house, the car, the investments, the insurance payout. I got a phone she'd stopped using in 2022. I drove home to Dartmouth in silence. My wife Rosalind was waiting at the door. She took one look at my face and didn't ask any questions. She just made tea, and we sat at the kitchen table, and I held that phone in both hands like it was something fragile. "She left you that on purpose," Rosalind said quietly. "She didn't do anything without a reason." I knew that. My daughter, her name was Alicia, she was meticulous, careful. She made lists for her grocery trips and color-coded her work calendar. She did not leave things by accident. If that phone was in that envelope, she put it there. I plugged it into the charger we kept in the junk drawer. It took about 40 minutes to power on. The lock screen came up, 4-digit PIN. I tried her birthday. Wrong. I tried mine. Wrong. I tried her mother's. Wrong. I sat there for a long time. Then I tried the year she graduated nursing school. It opened. The phone looked mostly cleared out. She deleted her social apps, her banking, her work apps, but there was a folder on the 3rd page of the home screen. She'd named it simply Dad. I had to set the phone down. I had to stand up and walk to the window and look out at the street for a minute before I could go back to it. Inside the folder were 3 things: a video file, a PDF, and a note app document. I opened the note first. "Dad, if you're reading this, then something happened to me and things didn't go the way I hoped. I need you to know that I love you and Mum more than I've ever been able to say properly. I'm sorry for being bad at that. I also need you to know that I found out some things about Terence that I couldn't ignore. I tried to handle it myself. Maybe I handled it wrong. But everything you need is in this phone. Don't delete anything. Don't confront him alone. Go to the RCMP detachment on Windmill Road and ask for Sergeant Bouchard. I already spoke with her 6 months ago. She's expecting someone might call eventually. She told me to make sure whoever came had the files. You have the files, Dad. I love you. Alicia." I read it 4 times. Then I sat down on the kitchen floor, which is not something a 63-year-old man with a bad knee does lightly, and I cried. Not the quiet kind of crying you do at funerals when you're trying to hold it together for everyone else. The other kind. Rosalind found me there. She didn't say anything. She just sat down on the floor beside me, which is also not easy for her. And she put her hand on my arm, and we stayed like that for a while. Alicia had died in March. A car accident on Highway 102 during a snowstorm, just past the Truro exit. The roads were bad. It happens in Nova Scotia, everyone said. It happens every winter. Terence had been home that night, he said he'd told her not to go, that she'd insisted on driving to her colleague's birthday dinner despite the weather. The RCMP had investigated. Wet roads, low visibility, no other vehicles involved. Her car had gone into the median. She hadn't been wearing her seatbelt, which surprised everyone who knew her, because Alicia was the kind of person who put her seatbelt on in a parking lot. I'd wondered about that. I had not said it out loud because what do you do with a thought like that, when there's no proof, when the investigators have closed the file, when your son-in-law is sitting in the front pew at her funeral looking like a grieving husband? She had put the files on that phone 8 months before she died. The PDF was a collection of screenshots, bank records she'd taken photos of, from an account I didn't recognize, not their joint account, not her personal account, a numbered company. She'd written the account number on a post-it and photographed it alongside a printed statement. There were transfers, significant ones, going back almost 4 years to just after they got married. The amounts varied, sometimes $3,000, sometimes $12,000, once $40,000, labeled as a consulting fee. The receiving account was registered in New Brunswick. I don't understand corporate finance. I'm a retired civil engineer, but I know what it looks like when money is being moved somewhere it's not supposed to go, because I spent 30 years working on government infrastructure contracts and I saw it happen more than once. Someone always thought they were being clever. The video was 18 minutes long. Alicia had recorded it on the phone, sitting in her car in what looked like the parking garage at the hospital where she worked. She spoke quietly and steadily, the way she always did when she was explaining something important. She laid out everything. How she'd first noticed the discrepancy in their household finances. How she'd started quietly tracking it. How she'd found the numbered company through a property record search. How she'd traced it back to Terence and to a woman in Moncton named. And she paused here, and almost smiled in a sad way, a woman she'd suspected he was involved with for over a year. He had been funneling their joint assets into a private account, not all at once, slowly, carefully, so it wouldn't trigger anything. He'd been planning to leave her, or he'd been planning something else. She didn't know which. She said in the video that she was scared, but that she wasn't sure if she was being paranoid, and that maybe nothing would come of it, and that she'd already spoken to the sergeant, and she felt a little better knowing someone official knew. She looked tired in the video. She looked like she hadn't been sleeping. "If you're watching this, Dad," she said near the end, "please don't do anything reckless. I know how you get. Just take this to Bouchard. Let the system work. I believe in the system." She paused. "I hope it deserves that." That was the last thing she said before she stopped the recording. I did not sleep that night. Rosalind sat with me until about 2 in the morning, going through everything, and then I made her go to bed because she had a doctor's appointment in the morning and she needed her rest. I sat at the kitchen table until the sky started going grey over the harbour, turning that phone over and over in my hands. I thought about Terence. I thought about how he'd shaken my hand at the funeral with both of his and said I was like a father to him. I thought about how he'd posted photographs of Alicia on his social media. Beautiful ones, ones from their early years together, with long captions about grief and loss. People had told me what a devoted husband he seemed. I thought about the seatbelt. I thought about what Alicia had said, "I know how you get." She was right. I am not, by nature, a patient man. I grew up in Cape Breton, youngest of 4 boys, and the way we solved problems was direct and immediate, and occasionally involved raised voices in driveways. Rosalind has spent 40 years gently civilizing me. Alicia had inherited the better parts of both of us, her mother's patience, and, when it was truly needed, my stubbornness. She told me to let the system work. At 7:15 in the morning, I got in my car and drove to the RCMP detachment on Windmill Road. Sergeant Isabel Bouchard was a compact woman in her late 40s with short grey-brown hair and the particular stillness of someone who has heard a great many difficult things and learned not to react to them on the surface. She came out to the waiting area herself when the constable at the desk called back to tell her why I was there. She shook my hand. She said she was sorry about my daughter. She said it simply, not the way people at the funeral had said it, with that overpowering weight of rehearsed condolence. She said it like she meant it, and then she moved on, which I respected. She brought me into a small interview room with a table and 4 chairs and 2 cups of terrible coffee, and I showed her the phone. She already knew some of it. Alicia had come to her the previous September, she confirmed, and had described what she suspected. At that time, there hadn't been enough to open a formal investigation. What Alicia had was suggestive but not conclusive, and without Alicia's consent to access certain financial records, there were legal constraints on what the RCMP could do. She told me she was going to keep documenting, Bouchard said. She said she'd come back when she had more. She hadn't come back. The accident had been in March. Bouchard looked at the PDF. She watched the video, the whole 18 minutes, without expression. When it was finished, she was quiet for a moment. "This is more than she had in September," she said. "Is it enough?" She didn't answer directly, which told me it probably was. "I'm going to need to take this phone," she said. "We'll give you a receipt. I also need a full statement from you, how you received it, the timeline, everything." I gave her 3 hours of my time that morning. I didn't call Rosalind until it was over because I knew she would have come down and I needed to do this part alone. This was the part Alicia had asked me to do, and I wanted to do it right. What happened next took months. That's the part that's hard to explain to people who've never been through an investigation. How long it takes, and how little information comes your way during the waiting. Bouchard called me twice with brief updates. They were working with financial crimes. They had applied for certain warrants. There were complications with the jurisdiction because of the New Brunswick account. She was professional and careful and told me nothing I could act on, which I understood but which did not make the waiting easier. Terence, meanwhile, had put the house on Braemar Drive up for sale. I drove past it once. There was a real estate sign on the lawn. Rosalind said I shouldn't drive past it again, and she was right, and I mostly listened. He had started posting on social media again, travel photos, a hiking trip somewhere out west, a restaurant in Vancouver. He was using Alicia's death as a kind of content, I thought. The bereaved widower finding his way back to life, the comments full of encouragement. I stopped looking at it after the 3rd time. It was making me into someone I didn't want to be. I went to church more that spring than I had in years, not because I had a sudden religious revelation, but because it was somewhere to put the feeling. The United Church on Pleasant Street, the one Alicia had been baptized in, the one where we'd held her memorial service. The minister, a tall woman named Reverend Atchison, who had known Alicia since she was a child, had a gift for speaking in a way that didn't feel like a performance. I found that useful. She said something to me once after a service that I thought about many times since. She said, "You know, Martin, the hardest part of trusting that justice will come is that we usually imagine it arriving on our timeline." My name is Martin, by the way. I don't think I've said that yet. In late October, 7 months after Alicia's death, 2 months after I'd given Bouchard the phone, Rosen and I were sitting down to dinner when my phone rang. It was a Halifax number I didn't recognize. It was a lawyer, not mine, a Crown Attorney's office. She introduced herself, and then she said she was calling to let me know, as a family member, that charges had been laid that afternoon. Financial fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, 2 counts under the Criminal Code of Canada relating to fraudulent manipulation of financial records, and 1 count, she paused before she said this one, 1 count of criminal negligence causing death. I had to ask her to repeat that last one. Criminal negligence causing death. She explained it carefully. The investigation had uncovered evidence that Terence had tampered with Alicia's vehicle, specifically with the seatbelt mechanism, in the days before the accident. A forensic examination of the wreck, re-examined at the request of financial crimes investigators who'd found reason to question the original findings, had identified evidence of tampering that hadn't been caught in the initial review. It was not conclusive enough for a murder charge, she said, but it was enough for criminal negligence. I put the phone down after the call and sat at the table for a long time. Rosalind had heard enough to understand. She came and sat beside me and took my hand. She knew, I said. She was scared enough to make that video. She was scared enough to go to the police. She was also brave enough to make sure you could finish it, Rosalind said. The trial was the following spring. I won't take you through all of it. Trials are long and procedural and exhausting in a way that's hard to describe. What I can tell you is that I sat in that courtroom almost every day it was in session. Rosalind came when she could. My son drove down from Ottawa for 2 weeks of it. Terence had a good lawyer. The financial charges were in some ways more straightforward. The evidence Alicia had gathered, combined with what the investigators had built on top of it, was substantial. The negligence charge was harder. His lawyer argued mechanical failure, argued the forensic re-examination was compromised, argued the original investigators had found nothing because there was nothing to find. The jury deliberated for 4 days. Guilty on both financial fraud counts, guilty on negligence causing death. When the verdict was read, I didn't feel what I expected to feel. I thought I would feel relief or satisfaction, or some version of the word justice that I'd been carrying around in my chest for over a year. Instead, I felt very tired and very sad, and more than anything, I felt the absence of my daughter. She should have been there. She should have been able to see it. She worked so hard to make sure someone would be able to see it, and the person who was supposed to be standing here wasn't. I cried in the courthouse parking lot. My son stood next to me and didn't say anything, which was the right thing to do. The house on Braemar Drive, the one Alicia and I had painted the kitchen of on a long weekend 12 years ago, the one where she'd had her friends over for dinner, the one that held a decade of her life. It came back through the courts. Proceeds of fraud. A portion was directed to the estate, which, with Terence convicted of criminal negligence, was restructured significantly under Nova Scotia estate law. Rosalind and I didn't get rich. That was never the point. But I'll tell you what I did get. There was one last thing. After everything was settled, the lawyers gave me back the Samsung phone, properly lobbed as evidence returned after the proceedings. It was old, scratched on the back corner, where she must have dropped it once. I sat with it in my car in the parking lot of the law office, and I scrolled through the rest of it, the parts I hadn't looked at carefully before. Her photos folder was still there. Hundreds of pictures. Family dinners, her cat, a trip she and her nursing colleagues had taken to Prince Edward Island. Sunsets over the Dartmouth waterfront that she must have photographed from her shift breaks. And one that stopped me completely. It was a photo of me, taken at Christmas 2 years ago when we'd all been together, before things had gotten bad, or before I'd known they were getting bad. I was sitting in my chair in the living room laughing at something, and she must have taken the picture when I wasn't looking. I'm not a man who photographs well. I don't look like myself in pictures, or that's what I always said. But in this one, I looked exactly like myself, like a father laughing in his living room. She'd kept it on her home screen rotation. I found it between a picture of her cat and a sunset. I don't have a way to explain what it means to be loved by someone who is gone. The love doesn't leave with them. It stays, and sometimes the weight of it is almost unbearable. And sometimes it's the only thing holding you up. Alicia believed in the system. She built something careful and deliberate and brave, and she left it for me to find, because she knew me, knew I would come looking, knew I wouldn't let it go. She knew me better than I knew myself. She always did. If you've ever received something from someone who's gone, something small, something they left quietly for you to find, you know what I mean when I say that some gifts don't look like anything at all until you really look at them. That old phone was everything. I keep coming back to a simple thing. Alicia was afraid, and she didn't let the fear stop her from thinking clearly. That distinction matters more to me now than almost anything else I've learned in 63 years. A lot of people, when they're frightened, go quiet. They talk themselves out of what they know. They decide it's probably nothing, or that speaking up will only make things worse, or that no one will believe them anyway. I understand that impulse. I've felt it myself in smaller situations. A disagreement at work I didn't want to escalate. A concern I swallowed because the timing felt wrong. But Alicia didn't do that. She was scared, and she still sat in a parking garage and recorded an 18-minute video, calmly and carefully, because she understood that what she knew might matter to someone after she was gone. That takes a particular kind of character. Not bravery in the dramatic sense, not the kind that announces itself, the quiet kind, the kind that does the right thing even when no one is watching, even when there's no guarantee it will ever matter. What Terence built over those 4 years was clever in a narrow way. He moved money slowly, he planned carefully, he made sure nothing looked sudden or suspicious. But cleverness without integrity is just a more elaborate way of failing. It only delays the moment when the whole thing collapses. And it always collapses because shortcuts taken at someone else's expense have a weight to them. They accumulate. Alicia noticed. The investigators noticed. The jury noticed. You cannot build something dishonest and expect it to hold. I've thought a lot about what I contributed to this, or what I failed to contribute. I didn't see what was happening inside her marriage. I didn't ask the right questions. There's some guilt in that, and I've had to sit with it. But I also think about what I did when it mattered. I went to the RCMP the morning after I found that folder. I gave them everything. I sat in that interview room for 3 hours and answered every question they asked me. I did not go to Terence's house. I did not make threats. I did not let my anger make decisions for me. And believe me, the anger was there. My daughter had asked me to trust the process, and I did. That might be the hardest thing I've ever done. There's something in that worth holding on to. The outcome of this story was not accidental. It was the product of choices. Choices Alicia made when she was alive. Choices I made after she was gone. Choices the investigators made when they looked again at evidence that had been set aside. Each of those choices required something: a clear mind, a steady sense of what was right, and the willingness to keep going even when the result wasn't guaranteed. Alicia believed the system deserved her trust. She said so in that video, in that parking garage, alone. I think she was right. But I also think the system only worked because she gave it something to work with. She did the hard, careful, unglamorous work of documentation. She thought it through. She planned. She didn't just hope someone would figure it out, she made sure they could. That old phone sitting in my kitchen drawer right now is a reminder of all 3 things at once. What it looks like to live with integrity, what it means to use your mind even when you're frightened, and what it costs, and what it's worth to refuse to give up. I don't have a tidy way to end this. I just know that I'm still here, and she isn't, and the least I can do with that fact is try to be the kind of person she thought I was.